Hello, welcome back to my channel. Hope you guys are all doing good. Today we are going to be talking about Steve McQueen's wristwatches. The ones that he wore in his personal life and also some of the ones that he wore in the movies. So with that being said, let's get into it. So to start us off, we are going to be talking about a movie that turned 50 this past June. And it is the original Thomas Crown affair. So with that being said, let's get into some of the watches that Steve McQueen wore in this movie. So the first watch is a gold Philippe Patek pocket watch. The next one is a gold Cartier Tank American. And last but not least is a gold Jaeger-LeCoultre wristwatch as well. Whoever chose Steve McQueen's watches in the Thomas Crown affair did a fantastic job, considering all three of these watches in 1968 were luxury status symbols, and they were all in precious metal, which really fits the status of Thomas Crown, which was a millionaire in the movie, quite well. And in 2018, 50 years later, these watches are still high-end luxury status symbols even today. Now this next movie also turns 50 in October of this year. It is of course Bullitt. Now Bullitt has one of the most famous car chase scenes in movie history. Steve McQueen driving a Ford Fastback GT Mustang chasing a Dodge through the city. Now, this car chasing is probably why Ford consistently made the Mustang for over 50 years, for better or worse, where other car brands like Chevy and Dodge retired their muscle cars. Now, getting back to the watches, in Bullitt, Steve McQueen is wearing a Benris field watch. Now, Benris was actually hired by the US Army to make watches for the troops that would be standard issue. They also made civilian models as well, which is the model that Steve McQueen is wearing in Bullitt. Now I think whoever chose the watch for Steve McQueen in this movie did a fantastic job for the Frank Bullitt character, this being a San Francisco veteran detective. He's a rough, kind of rugged character, and the watch is a rough, rugged watch as well. Now the next watch is the watch that Steve McQueen wore in the mall, which was of course the Hoya Monaco. Now this was before Hoya was bought by Tag and became Tag Heuer, which is now known as a fashion watch. Hoya at the time was known as a good quality, well-made tour watch, and was involved in a lot of motor racing events, which is why Steve McQueen chose this particular watch. He wanted to stay true to the heritage and history of the sport of motor racing. Now the Hoya Monaco has been reissued a few times. There are some quite bad reissues of this watch, and of course there are some good reissues of this watch. There was one that included the print of Steve McQueen's signature on the inside of the box. This was of course the first square chronograph watch that was waterproof at the time, and I think it's a very core 60s, 70s design chronograph, but I want to hear your opinion. What is your opinion on the Hoya Monaco? Leave it in the comments down below. Now moving on to some of the watches that Steve McQueen actually had in his own life. Now let's get the elephant out of the way first. The Rolex Explorer to the 1655. This has been quoted by quite a few other watch YouTubers and watch blogs as being the Steve McQueen Rolex. There is no evidence and no photos of Steve McQueen actually owning or wearing this watch. So a watch that Steve McQueen actually wore and owned was a Hanhart 417. This was a World War II chronograph. Now, there's quite a few photos of Steve McQueen wearing this watch. When he was racing motorcycles, he actually had this watch on when he was doing the trials. And there's a famous photo of Steve McQueen wearing a pair of white tennis shoes, a pair of tan chinos, with his sunglasses on, holding a revolver with this watch on his wrist. He actually wore it on a leather cuff, very similar to how Paul Newman wore his Daytona. Last but not least is Steve McQueen's Rolex subs. Now, it's known that Steve McQueen owned at least 2 Rolex subs in his lifetime. The Rolex Sub 5512, which was sold at auction a few years back, and a Rolex Sub 5513 with a custom engraving on the back. Both the Rolex 5513 and 5512 are classic, iconic Rolex watches that are extremely collectible today. Now, fun fact, you can see Steve McQueen's Rolex subs in 3 of the movies he starred in, including Le Mans, which after he drives his Porsche through the little town, he ends up at the racetrack. He gets out of his car and is standing there. You can actually see his Rolex sub on his wrist, even though Hoya sponsored that movie. And there's a whole bunch of photos of Steve McQueen backstage wearing his Rolex sub or the Hoya Monaco for filming and directing that movie. The other movie you can see Steve McQueen wearing his Rolex sub is The Towering Inferno, also starring Paul Newman. You can also see him wearing his Rolex sub in The Hunter, which was Steve McQueen's last film. Now, as of right now, why I am filming this video, Phillips has pulled Steve McQueen's Rolex sub from the auction. There is some sort of issue right now with Steve McQueen's estate, so they are not going to be auctioning it off right now. Now, I do think because they have auctioned off other things of Steve McQueen through other auction houses, like his other Rolex sub, his Hoya Monaco, his cars, and even his Peugeot sunglasses, I do think they will auction off the Rolex Sub 5513 at some point. And with Paul Newman's Daytona selling for $17.8 million, which is the most any Rolex has ever been sold for, the bar is set quite high. And on that bombshell, it's time to end. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share this video, tell some friends, hit that bell icon, it notifies you guys when I post new videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.